To us, it is just water, the source of all life. But to the rest of the galaxy, it is a Class 5 corrosive acid that dissolves starship armor in seconds. Imagine the terror of the alien commander who came to conquer Earth, only to watch a human pick up a bottle of the deadliest poison in the universe, and drink it. The massive survey ship, the Gilded Wing, dropped out of warp speed at the very edge of the Sol system. The engines hummed with a low vibration that shook the floor of the command bridge. Commander Crick stood alone at the front of the room, his 4 eyes fixed on the giant main screen. Space was usually dark and empty, filled only with dead rocks and cold stars, but today was different. Today, they had found a prize. Slowly, the third planet from the yellow sun came into view, rotating peacefully in the darkness. It did not look like the dry, dusty worlds they were used to finding. This planet shone like a polished jewel. The world was breathtakingly beautiful. Massive swirls of pure white clouds danced high above the surface, creating complex patterns that mesmerized the alien crew. However, the most striking feature was the color blue. Deep, vibrant patches of blue covered more than 70% of the planet's surface. Crix had never seen so much liquid in one place before. To the crew of the Gilded Wing, liquid was a rare and precious resource, often used for high-grade starship fuel or dangerous chemical reactions. Seeing an entire world drowning in this mysterious blue substance made their hearts race with greed. They imagined that they had stumbled upon the greatest treasure in the galaxy. Sensors on the ship began to beep rapidly as they scanned the planet's atmosphere. The science officers worked quickly, their fingers flying across their consoles. The data was almost too good to be true. The gravity was gentle, the temperature was mild, and the atmosphere was rich with oxygen. It seemed like a paradise waiting to be claimed. The crew whispered excitedly among themselves, dreaming of the riches they would earn from harvesting the blue liquid. They believed it was a calm and passive substance, perhaps a vast ocean of liquid energy. Commander Crix smiled, thinking he was the luckiest captain alive. He did not know that the beautiful blue surface was a trap. He had no idea that the liquid was a deadly solvent capable of melting their ships, and that the planet was actually a graveyard for any species that dared to touch the water. Commander Crix gave the silent signal to deploy the beta probe to investigate the mysterious blue surface. A sleek, silver machine detached from the belly of the Gilded Wing and fired its thrusters toward the planet below. This probe was a masterpiece of galactic engineering, built with the strongest alloys known to their civilization. It was designed to withstand the crushing pressure of gas giants and the intense heat of volcanic moons. The crew watched the main screen with bated breath as the drone pierced the Earth's white clouds. They expected the probe to gently land on the liquid surface and begin pumping the valuable resource into its storage tanks. To them, this was a routine mining operation, and the blue zone was just a passive pool of wealth waiting to be collected. As the probe descended closer to the surface, the cameras beamed back high-definition images of the target. The liquid was constantly moving, shifting in waves that looked hypnotic and terrifyingly powerful. The probe slowed down, hovering for a moment above the vast Pacific Ocean before initiating its landing sequence. The crew leaned closer to their monitors, eager to see the chemical composition of the mysterious substance. The metal landing struts of the probe touched the surface of the water with a gentle splash. For a split second, everything seemed normal, but then the sensors on the ship began to scream with red alert warnings, flashing wildly across the command deck. The reaction was instant and violent. As soon as the probe's hull made contact with the liquid, the chemical bonds of the alien metal began to break down. The water acted like a superacid against their technology, sizzling and boiling against the probe's armor. On the screen, the image distorted as the camera lens itself began to melt. There was no explosion, only the terrifying sight of the strongest metal in the galaxy turning into sludge. The probe did not sink, it simply disintegrated. The blue liquid ate through the outer shell, destroyed the delicate internal circuits, and silenced the machine in a matter of seconds. The screen on the bridge flickered and went dark, leaving the crew in a stunned, terrified silence. They finally realized with horror that the entire planet was covered in a substance that could dissolve their technology like sugar in hot tea. Panic spread through the command deck of the Gilded Wing like a virus. The science officer's hands shook as he locked the ship's position in a high orbit, terrified that even the moisture in the atmosphere might be corrosive enough to damage their engines. Commander Crick stared at the black screen where the probe had died, his mind racing to understand what had just happened. He knew they should flee immediately to safety, but his curiosity overpowered his fear. He needed to understand how a planet could exist with oceans made of such potent acid. He ordered the high-resolution sensors to focus on the edge of the blue zones, where the liquid met the solid land. The cameras zoomed in on a stretch of sandy coastline in a region the locals called Florida. Cricks expected to see a barren, dead wasteland, burned and scarred by the deadly chemical fumes. However, the image that appeared on the main screen made absolutely no sense to his alien mind. The coast was teeming with active biological life. Hundreds of bipedal creatures were gathered on the sand, wearing almost no protective gear at all. They were soft and fleshy, with exposed skin ranging from pale pink to deep brown. To the armored alien crew, these creatures looked incredibly fragile, like they would bruise if the wind blew too hard. They had no natural exoskeletons, no energy shields, and certainly no hazard suits. Yet, they were walking dangerously close to the edge of the bubbling blue solvent. The crew watched in disbelief, waiting for the inevitable moment when the chemical fumes would melt the creatures' soft skin. But the creatures did not die. They seemed completely relaxed, lying on colorful fabrics and soaking up raw radiation from the nearby star, ignoring the vast ocean of death just a few meters away. Then, the unthinkable happened. A group of smaller, younger creatures broke away from the safety of the dry sand and ran directly into the liquid. The alien crew gasped in unison, expecting to witness a gruesome tragedy. They waited for the flesh to dissolve and the bones to bleach, just like their metal probe had done only minutes before. Instead, the small creatures splashed the deadly solvent onto each other. They submerged their entire bodies in it and resurfaced, laughing and screaming with joy. The liquid dripped from their faces and hair, but there were no burns and no injuries. Cricks felt a wave of nausea hit his stomach. These were not just survivors, they were biological monsters. Their skin was somehow impervious to the most corrosive substance in the galaxy. The aliens realized with absolute terror that this species did not fear the acid, they used it as a toy. The terror on the ship deepened as the crew continued to watch the horrific scene on the monitors. Commander Cricks could not look away, though every instinct in his body told him to run. The visual feed focused on an adult male human walking slowly across the hot sand toward a small, insulated container. He reached inside and retrieved a transparent plastic bottle. The liquid inside sloshed around, clear and deadly, identical to the vast ocean that had destroyed the alien probe. The crew held their breath, wondering what the creature intended to do with a portable sample of the solvent. Cricks theorized that perhaps it was a primitive grenade or maybe a fuel source for a small device. The idea that a biological being would carry such a dangerous chemical in a thin plastic shell seemed reckless and insane to the careful observers on the ship. The human twisted the cap off the bottle with casual ease, breaking the seal. He tilted his head back and lifted the container to his lips. On the bridge of the Gilded Wing, the science officer let out a strangled cry of disbelief. The human did not pour the liquid on a machine or a weapon, he poured the corrosive fluid directly into his own open mouth. The aliens watched in stunned silence as the creature swallowed gulp after gulp of the acid. They waited for his throat to burn, for smoke to rise from his mouth, or for him to collapse in agony as his internal organs melted. But nothing happened. The human simply wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, let out a satisfied sigh, and capped the bottle. He had just consumed enough solvent to dissolve a starship engine, and he looked refreshed. This was the breaking point for the alien crew. The medical scans on the screen confirmed the nightmare. The human body was not just resistant to the solvent, it was largely composed of it. The sensors indicated that these monsters were walking bags of acid, made of nearly 70% water. They required the deadly liquid to survive, using it to cool their internal systems and fuel their cellular regeneration. To the rest of the galaxy, water was death, but to Earth, it was the essence of life. Crix realized with a shudder that they were looking at the ultimate predators. If a human ever bled on a spaceship, their blood would melt through the floor. If a human breathed on an alien, the moisture could cause severe chemical burns. Earth was not just a dangerous planet, it was a breeding ground for biological weapons that walked, talked, and drank poison for fun. Commander Crix was about to order the ship to move to a higher orbit when a new alarm pierced the silence of the bridge. This was not a proximity alert from the surface, but a critical structural warning from the ship's own hull. The tactical officer pointed frantically at the atmospheric readings. A massive storm system was forming rapidly in the atmosphere below, swirling with dark, heavy clouds. To a human, this was merely a tropical thunderstorm, a natural and refreshing event. To the crew of the Gilded Wing, it was an apocalyptic weapon charging up to fire. The sensors indicated that the clouds were heavy with the same liquid solvent that filled the oceans. The planet was preparing to rain death from the sky, covering everything in a blanket of acid. The horror escalated when the ship flew through a thin layer of upper atmospheric mist. The microscopic droplets of water vapor struck the ship's energy shields like kinetic missiles. The shields flared and sparked, struggling to repel the corrosive moisture. A few droplets bypassed the shields and touched the physical hull near the engine exhaust ports. The metal hissed violently, turning black and brittle upon contact. Smoke began to fill the lower decks as the outer armor compromised under the chemical assault. The science officer screamed that the atmospheric saturation was rising to lethal levels. If the ship remained in the gravity well any longer, the coming storm would wash over them, and the hull would simply dissolve into the wind, leaving the crew exposed to the vacuum of space. There was no time for proper procedures or calculations. Commander Crix slammed his fist onto the emergency override button, diverting all available power to the main thrusters. He did not care about a smooth exit, he only cared about survival. The ship shuddered violently as it fought against Earth's gravity, clawing its way upward through the deadly clouds. The engines roared, burning hot to vaporize the moisture clinging to the fuselage. They were running away from a planet where the air itself was poison. As they punched through the final layer of the atmosphere and reached the safety of the void, the crew collapsed in exhaustion. They had escaped the water world, but they knew they could never return. The planet was a fortress protected by a chemical shield that no technology in the galaxy could withstand. 2 weeks after their narrow escape, the scarred and pitted hull of the Gilded Wing limped into the vast docking bay of the galactic capital. Commander Crix did not even take time to repair the ship before marching directly into the Great Hall of the High Council. The room was filled with the most powerful leaders from a dozen different star systems, but the silence was heavy and suffocating. Crix projected the mission logs onto the massive central holographic screen. The counselors watched in stunned horror as the footage played. They saw the probe dissolve into nothingness within seconds. They saw the fleshy creatures swimming in the ocean of acid. Finally, they saw the human male drinking the deadly solvent from a plastic bottle, a sight that caused several counselors to physically recoil in disgust and fear. The evidence was undeniable and terrifying. The High Counselor, an elder of the ancient Dracian race, stood up slowly, his face pale and grim. He realized that the species on that blue marble was not just surviving in a hostile environment, they were made of it. The biological scans proved that humans were composed of 70% solvent. This meant that every human was a walking biological weapon. If a human traveled to a space station and simply sneezed, the droplets of moisture could melt the hull and kill everyone on board. If a human touched an alien with a sweaty hand, it would result in a chemical burn. The Council realized that they could never invite these creatures into the galactic community. The risk of accidental contamination was far too high. The humans were simply too dangerous to be allowed off their own world. The decision was made instantly and unanimously. The Council ordered the immediate construction of massive warning beacons around the entire perimeter of the Sol system. They designated Earth as a Class 10 death world, the highest danger rating in existence. The beacons broadcast a continuous warning signal in every known language, telling all ships to stay at least 1 light-year away from the blue zones. They locked the solar system inside a permanent quarantine field, ensuring that no ship would ever accidentally stumble upon the planet of acid again. On Earth, the humans continued to look up at the night sky, wondering why the universe seemed so empty and silent. They had no idea that the galaxy was teeming with life, but everyone was hiding in the dark, terrified of the monsters who drank poison for breakfast.